If you know you should be making more outbound calls to win new business for your MSP, but you hate picking up the phone, this is going to blow your mind. Perhaps the single most effective marketing tactic you could ever use is just to pick up the phone and call ordinary business owners and managers. Yes, it's hard to get past the gatekeeper and engage someone in a conversation they don't really want to have. But the quality of the conversation, even in just a few minutes, can be off the scale. It's one of the most reliable ways to discover who is nearly ready, willing and able to buy the services that you sell. Most MSPs hate making these calls, and my special guest today is a real expert at making them. In fact, he's called at least 1,000 decision makers in his career, and today he's going to spill all of his hard-won secrets of how to get through, how to get them engaged, and ultimately how to get decision makers to book a sales meeting with you.
Hi, I'm Dave Sutton. I'm one of the owners of Wingman MSP Marketing.
And thank you so much, Dave, making your debut on this podcast, although your business partner, Mark Copeman, has been on at least 2 or 3 times. And lots of MSPs will know Mark from speaking at events around the world and for being on podcasts and webinars and everywhere. But they probably don't know that actually Mark does no work at all. In Wingman MSP Marketing, Mark does all the poncing around and the, ooh, look at me, pretty much like I do. And then you do all the actual work in the background. So thank you very much for, we've pulled you out of the cave of getting things done, and you're giving us a little bit of time for this interview, so thank you. What we're going to talk about is something which you, I know, did yourself for many years, and I know you have now a team of 6 people doing. It's phoning business owners. It's the thing that MSPs hate doing, and I know you and your team do this on behalf of lots of MSPs. What I want to get out of you today is some secrets, some things that you do which helps you to get through to other businesses and get hold of decision makers. But let's go back a step first, and let's just look at how you got started, Dave. So you started Wingman originally on your own. How long have you been going?
Yes, almost 8 years now, and everything started from telemarketing, really. So from lead gen, I think as the MSP market has matured and people have realised that brand and digital and all these other things are important, that we brought those into the fold over the years. But still, there's that crux of I'm an MSP owner and I need leads like yesterday that I can turn into customers. And still, even in this digitized age, picking up the phone, having a conversation with someone, asking questions, it's the only way to build that direct rapport and open a door to a conversation with a prospect.
Yeah, I agree completely, 1,000%. And in fact, because of the digital world, that's why you need to have the phone aspect. And, you know, and I'm sure you would agree with me on this, but when I see an MSP in a marketplace who has somebody doing outbound calls, whether it's an agency like yours, whether it's someone in-house, whether it's, you know, just a part-time mum making 2-3 hours of calls 2-3 days a week, they have a distinct advantage because they're just touching more people, having relationship building calls with more prospects and eventually you get lucky, and I've put getting lucky in speech marks there because it's not really getting lucky, it's working the numbers, it's getting through to people. So you originally were the one actually doing the calls for MSPs. Now, you know, to me that sounds like the worst job in the world. I would rather be, you know, sweeping mud off the street in the rain. I don't know where I'm going with that analogy, but I'd rather lose a toe. Let's go with that. I'd rather lose a toe than actually have to pick up the phone every day. So what was that like, actually just calling people day in, day out?
It does feel like sweeping mud uphill sometimes, yeah. So I could see where you were going with that one. But it's a numbers game. You've got to make 100 plus dials a day to have the chance of having 10 to 15 meaningful conversations, of which 2 or 3 might go somewhere, and repeating that process relentlessly. But I think the mistake that most people make is they look for a salesperson in that role. You know, agencies, MSPs, whoever, they hire sales-based people for that role, which actually are probably the wrong person. You know, a salesperson is great when they're put in front of a prospect that's, you know, lukewarm and has an appetite to move forward. But actually that dogged work up front is better led by someone that can start a conversation. They don't feel too salesy, they're not too pushy, and they're inquisitive and they ask questions, because it's all about building an audience first that you can then nurture. You know, rarely are people looking for a new IT provider. And more often than not, that's because they're in bed with someone that they've been with for years. As we all know, our clients as an MSP are incredibly loyal, and most MSPs are like that. So So therefore, it's hard out there in the market to find people that are looking to switch. So you want to drop in some little tidbits of things that they might want to consider. Have they questioned their incumbent upon? But you can only do that when you've vetted the audience. You know they're the right size, right location, right industry. They're a good fit on the face of it. And even in this data paranoid age and heavily regulated sort of world that we live in now, people still unwittingly just share information with you on the phone when you ask questions. And more often than not, we try and gun for a decision maker. Everybody thinks about telemarketing, you need the decision maker. But often it's the office manager, it's the finance manager, it's a middle manager person, perhaps that middle-aged woman that runs the office. She's the person that you need to be speaking to because she's the one that can rattle the cages of the decision makers. She's the one that you need to befriend and learn when she's taking the cat to the vet and all of that kind of good stuff. That means that there's some power behind your follow-up when you pick up the phone again.
Yeah, exactly that. And of course, knowing that she's taken the cat to the vet, that's not something you have to remember. That all goes in your CRM. So when you call her back 3-6 months later, you can say, oh, when are you going to the vets with your cat? I hope everything worked out or whatever. I know you now have a team of 6 doing these calls for you. In my last business, I had a team of 3 full-time telesales people. Now their job was to actually call business owners in our verticals. We operated in 3 healthcare verticals in that old business. And I have to be honest, the best performing of them was a lady called Miranda. I think I've talked about her on the podcast before because she was just natural. She would write down things like going on holiday or taking eldest daughter to university, and she would make the follow-up call a few months later about that. It's almost like she was calling someone who was a friend. It's like, oh, hi, Stephen. Hey, last time we were talking, you were taking your daughter to university. And so she was having 5-10 minute conversations about that and then having a 2-minute conversation about our business, but she got the best results, which was amazing. So what I did find is, and a lot of MSPs find this, is those 3 telesales people were the noisiest and hardest people on my staff. And by noisiest, I don't mean from talking, I mean in terms of dramas. If anyone was going to be late, it'd be one of the telesales. If anyone was going to have a crisis, it'd be one of the telesales. One of them left every 6 to 8 weeks, so we had a constant hiring thing. You have 6 people. Do you have a similar experience, or have you sort of figured out how to get a stable team and keep them?
A common challenge, but yes, thankfully, many years of hard work and refining the right folks. The mumsy type, you mentioned at the start of the podcast, someone that's perhaps a mum that's looking for part-time hours. They are the ideal people because they don't sound salesy. They're reliable. They need to turn up to work because they've got bills to pay. But also they are disarming. When you hear a mumsy tone on the phone, you don't feel threatened. You don't feel that they're going to immediately start pitching to you. So actually then you're disarmed and you're likely to then start sharing information with them. But also importantly, they've got life experience that they can throw in things like taking the kids to school and talk about, university, as you mentioned. And the young kids that you typically get as the SDR or telemarketer type applicants that are starting their career in sales, they don't have any of that. So they don't have any context that they can bring to conversations with people much older than them. So it takes a real knack from a personal skill level to have the right character to bring into those phone calls.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though you're running an MSP marketing agency doing this for MSPs, this is still really relevant to MSPs themselves because the chances are, as the MSP owner, you're not going to do the calls, you're going to get someone else to do it for you. And as you just heard there, I completely, this is going to be a boring interview, Dave, because we agree. We have exactly the same opinion about the right kind of people to hire. But for an MSP listening to this, that's that person you want, which fits very well with my recommendation. I always say, get a back to work mom, 2 to 3 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. It's absolutely perfect. Dave, let's talk about what two issues. I'm not going to ask you to give away any secret sauce because you've spent years perfecting this, but what do you do to get past the gatekeeper and what do you do to grab their attention?
More often than not, especially if you're targeting, the SME or SMB space, whatever you want to call it, which most MSPs are, you don't know who the person is that's answering the phone. There's this natural assumption that the gatekeeper is going to be a receptionist type that doesn't know what's going on in the business and they can't answer anything. But more often than not, it might be one of the owners of the business that just happens to answer the inbound calls, or perhaps a middle manager, office manager type. So I would say always be careful to just consider that you might be talking to the boss when the phone gets answered. So don't sort of immediately go in with an approach that this is a useless receptionist that I need to get past very quickly, which is a common trait of anyone starting their career in sales. So start by asking questions, and very quickly, someone that is perhaps quite junior in that job role, they will very quickly be out of their depth. So if they are not comfortable talking about the IT arrangements of the business, they can't tell you the name of the provider that they use, how they rate the relationship, how many years they've worked together, very quickly they will become unstuck. And they will either want to throw you like a hot potato over at a colleague that can answer the questions because they can't, or they will dismiss you and get you off the phone. But we still find people that are in that capacity where it isn't them, they will very quickly say, oh, it's Sharon that you need to speak to. She's the finance manager. She deals with that kind of thing.
And so once you've got through to that right person, you were saying earlier that often people aren't ready to switch IT provider. It is very much about finding, who's ready, willing and able to even have the conversation, let alone make the switch. What's your sort of general approach for doing that? So do you get them talking about their business, or do you just jump straight into talking about IT?
Absolutely. Always a business first. 9 times out of 10, if you're selling to people that don't have anyone in an IT capacity within their organization, they're not going to know anything about IT. They probably won't even be able to tell you how many servers they've got, maybe not even how many PCs they've got in the office. So they're never going to be able to go into any depth about how they view things from a technical perspective. But people love moaning, especially us Brits. They will always happily moan about a service issue, communication problems, or that their IT is frustrating on a user workflow basis, particularly where tech has become invisible. They don't have servers with blinking, flashing lights in the corner anymore. That's all evaporated to the cloud. So the IT that they're using is all the apps and tools on their PC every day. And if they're not getting an elegant experience, they feel as though they're missing the trick on new advanced in technology like AI and things like that. A lovely bit of FOMO is a great way to start a conversation. Where are perhaps the incumbent MSP failing to help them to fully leverage technology? Are there things that are laborious red tape that they're having to do day in, day out that tech could do for them? Perhaps even looking at things like, are they hiring? Are they recruiting a part-time finance person? And just go in there with a bit of a loaded assumption on, I can help you automate that person out of a job so you don't need to hire that part-time finance person. We're starting to see the market turn to people now becoming aware of, yeah, we'd like to get more from tech. Yeah, our current IT provider, they're okay. We phone them when something's broken and they fix it, but they're not helping us move forward. There's no impetus to upgrade or reinvent ourselves to digitize our workflow. So rapidly now, more and more small to mid-sized firms are waking up to, oh yeah, tech isn't a necessary evil. It's actually something that will help us. So we're finding more prospects now are prepared to talk about things at that level, and that's creating new opportunity.
Yeah, I bet. And just one thing, you mentioned FOMO, just for anyone that doesn't know, that stands for fear of missing out. And Dave, do you see AI, is that coming up in conversations? Because obviously in our world, that we talk about AI all the time. Everyone who's listening to this or watching this on YouTube knows what Copilot is, right? But what about the ordinary business owners? Are they aware of it?
AI, yes, thankfully, because of how mainstream it's gone. When ChatGPT became this wonderful thing that everyone was aware of, and as soon as you see it, online everywhere, TV news is talking about it all the time. It's hit the masses, and people maybe slightly fearful of it. They don't know where to get started. They can't join the dots up between what they do day to day and where technology could actually help them. We hoped there would be this sort of impetus a few years ago when automation first became a thing. Power Automate, Power Apps, all these wonderful things in 365 and, Zapier and all these other tools that could hook up your CRM system with your marketing automation system or your website and all of those things. We were quite excited with that opportunity, but it fell flat because it didn't make mainstream media. People didn't get it. They think of automation and they think of a robot making cars in a factory, but AI has hit the mainstream. So now people have got that fear of something's out there and we're not leveraging it. So we're starting to see more conversations now from businesses where they're interested in leveraging more from tech where they feel their incumbent doesn't help them. And by the way, that's far more exciting and interesting for a small business owner to want to spend time looking at than their cybersecurity, which people are still vehemently against or are ignorant or ambivalent where cybersecurity is concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And that matches the feedback that I get from people I talk to who do phone calls as well, MSPs in their business, that, cybersecurity is the number one issue if you run an MSP, but for business owners, it's an annoyance, it's a pain, it's something on the side. And I think what MSPs have to do is use different approaches to reach people, and then you protect them from themselves in the actual service delivery. Final question for you, Dave, and that's that when you're phoning people, obviously you're doing so on behalf of lots of MSPs, because I know you work with MSPs around the world. And when you're phoning, are you phoning to book video calls directly into live calendars, or do you have a different outcome that you're going for? And based on your answer to that, how do you get that? Do you just out and out talk about, hey, why don't we arrange a 15-minute chat for you and the owner of the business? What's your kind of approach to that?
Yeah, gunning for a meeting has always got to be the right way forward. I think it's about knowing the prospect well enough and the qualification criteria that you want to achieve. How will the meeting be helpful for the prospect? And ultimately, in the back of our mind, is there an opportunity for our MSP client to go in there and leverage their skills and their portfolio to help that business? Sometimes we go as far as we can, being outsourced, or even if it's, an internal SDR making calls within an MSP, there's a limit to their knowledge. And often that's a good excuse to say, I can't help you any further with this, but I need to bring in my colleague that can help you, and schedule a date and time. Have that calendar open, have the availability there at hand so you can capture when someone is around and get the date in the diary, shoot them a calendar invite immediately on the back of that phone call. Events is a great way for telemarketing to be able to feed, perhaps sort of lower warmth leads into a business. When you look at that grade of lead, the marketing industry talks about MQL in terms of marketing qualified lead, or SQL in terms of sales qualified lead. Those face-to-face appointments really should be those SQLs, opportunities where there's budget on the table, there's momentum to move forward, there's a real pain right now. But given that many prospects aren't there yet, or they may be in the fullness of time, how can you get some face time with prospects that are not yet ready to buy, but you can feed them with education? You can build your personal brand with them as well as the brand of your MSP. And that's through webinars, events. It's where you can provide education, perhaps if it's industry specific or it's around that FOMO piece. If we know we've got a pool of prospects we've spoken to where they're considering AI is a gap in their business right now, then host an event where you can give them top 5 tips that you can implement AI in your business tomorrow, that kind of thing. Even if it's pre-recorded content, it allows you to build that all-important connection and start to establish trust and awareness with those prospects.
Love it. Thank you, Dave. You've been very generous with your secrets, with your knowledge. Just tell us a little bit more about Wingman MSP Marketing. What do you do, and how can we get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So as Paul mentioned, we look after MSPs around the world that are looking to perhaps target a niche or diversify their business so they can stand out from the crowd of other MSPs. If they're looking for direct outreach, they're looking for more leads to their website, then we can help them reach more prospects more quickly through a whole myriad of marketing sources that we do with our team of roughly 25 people that we've got here now based out of the UK.
And what's the best way to get in touch with you, Dave?
Oh, sorry, the most important thing. I'm not a very good marketer, am I, if I don't address that. Visit our website, wingmanmspmarketing.com. A great conversation starter for us is our free website review. So if you're not sure about your presence right now, you're not sure how unique you are, whether your personality is cutting across with prospects, fill in that review. We'll come back to you with a video that's personally tailored to you, your MSP, and your website. And that's a great way to get started.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.